We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney. The number 737-7587 if you want to join in the conversation. Some mornings, folks, I think sit back and listen, Clint, like I am to you, as I so often do, but they're welcome to call in. I'm just curious, what are some of the most common cases now that you're seeing? We've talked about joints. We've talked about the clotting issue.
Yes.
That's still out there, along with the germs. So what are you seeing these days?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what else is interesting. You ran that story not too long ago about the nurse who gave the wrong medication and then sat on it for 3 days, which, by the way, we can prove that.
That's right.
In black and white. That's
right.
Plain as day what happened. Medication errors are becoming more commonplace, and I'll tell you where they're happening more often than not. They're happening either in Alzheimer's facility, nursing homes, in some cases in hospitals, and in pharmacies. Those are the 4 places where you're beginning to see more medication errors. I attribute it again to volume. The number of patients are going up, therefore the margin of error is shrinking, but I also believe that those being the people who are supervising the medications to make sure they're filled properly, are just not doing a good enough job.
They're putting the wrong pills in the bottles.
Yeah.
Well, we did another story where that happened.
Yeah.
But I don't look. And I forgot. The other day I had to go get some antibiotics. I had an infection, and I didn't stop. They gave it to me at the pharmacy. And then as I left, and I was already in the car, I thought, Clint would have said I should have taken them out and made sure. I didn't know what the heck I had. I trusted him.
Yeah.
Well, 99% of the people trust. And 99% of the time, the pill, thank goodness mine worked. It was the real deal. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? I mean, I don't know what a pill looks like. What's a certain antibiotic supposed to look like, Clint?
Well, in a way, patients, we're all victims of the success of our prior generation of pharmacists who always got it right, and so we took it for granted that pill would always be the correct pill. You never gave a moment's thought to it being the wrong pill. Now you're beginning to see more and more claims of dispensing the wrong medication or the wrong dosage. And so now patients are going to have to be more vigilant and take more responsibility for their own care, because you can't rely on people like pharmacists to get it right all the time.
So we've got a bunch of calls that just came in. I want to get to those, but real quick then. So next time I go to the pharmacy and they've called it in and I'm picking up my prescription, it says on the label what it is. I'm looking in. I have no idea. There's some capsules. What do you do?
Well, you have to look at your pill.
Okay.
I mean, that's just
okay. I'll look at the pill, but I'll look at it.
it.
It's a blue capsule, and it's supposed to have antibiotics in it. What am I supposed to do then? Am I supposed to say, "Hey, are you sure this is the right one? Just double check." Oh yeah, that's it, Nick. Okay, is that it?
First of all, they're not going to double check for you, Nick. They're just going to say yes, and you're going to walk out. So that does nothing. That does nothing. But you look at the pill. If the pill looks the same, then you know there's.
But if it's the first time I'm getting that prescription, now, by the way,
you can go online and open up PDR and see if that's the case. If you want to be extra special careful.
I'm not that paranoid. Or is that being paranoid?
Probably. Probably. But
think of what it could save you if you catch it.
Really, Nick, it's no different than sitting at a red light and somebody rear-ended you. What can you do?
I know.
Other than not being on the road. You got to take medication just like you got to drive, so there's going to be some risk involved. That's why we rely on a healthy tort system, so that when those things happen, we can all be compensated fairly and move on.
Gotcha. All right, let's go to David. David is on line 1. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Nick. Good morning, attorney. The reason I can't understand why, and maybe you can explain it to me, why every study I've looked at, AARP links to other organizations like that for the 50-plus crowd, of which I'm a part of, why the South, and especially places like Tennessee, are not good places to retire, where they say that, with tort reform and everything, which I don't understand why poor people would vote against their own interests and vote for these Republicans who basically are looking out for the hospitals and corporations. And maybe the jury feels like, why would I give this guy a chance to make $1 million of something I will never ever see in my lifetime? And I think I'll vote with the hospital. Is that what it is? If you could explain that to me, it would be great to know.
He'll take a bite of that one.
Yeah, David, you just said it with your own mouth. That's exactly what happens with a lot of juries. That's exactly how they feel. Right now, we live in a time where man has very little concern for his fellow man, or can be envious of his fellow man. And it's, where's mine? I'm not going to give you yours because I don't have mine. We could spend an entire show talking about voters voting against their own pocketbook or their personal interest. But I want to get to one other point you made, which I think is an easier point to discuss here today, and that is living in the South in states that have tort reform, the effect of that.
Yep.
We've passed tort reform in Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Arkansas, North Carolina. Kentucky just passed, although theirs has been overturned by the Supreme Court.
Remind the folks just the basics of what tort law is, real quick, and then get back to your point.
It just simply means that the legislatures have made it harder to sue for malpractice, medical mistakes, and they have capped damages, so you can only recover so much in damages.
But tort law is civil
Tort
law.
law is civil. It's lawsuits.
Yes.
Civil lawsuits.
There you
Okay.
go. Just wanted
so
a lot of people
tort
to hear that
reform,
term.
and we call it tort deform, is they've deformed the laws by making it harder for regular folks to sue and difficult to get full compensation because they cap your damages, which inevitably affect the most injured people and the poor. That's what Dave was saying, the poor. But getting back to David's point, we've passed that in all of these states, including Tennessee. What has happened to the rates of medical malpractice in virtually every one of the states? Gone up. So the legislature sold us on the fact that if you cap damages and make it harder for people to sue, more doctors will come into the state, hospitals will be freer and more comfortable in providing care, and therefore lawsuits will go down. Well, just the opposite happened. Now there's no real way to hold people accountable because, you know what? If a hospital can say, we can screw you up, but we know exactly what it's going to cost us, and we know the cost is only going to be so much.
They can budget for it.
They can budget for it. That's exactly right, Nick. They can budget for it.
Right.
Some people think that's fair. Some people think that's good business, and people who are business-minded believe that that's the right result. There are people who believe
Until
that.
you're the one that's the victim.
But if one of these business people are the ones that get their leg whacked off, or they wind up in a wheelchair, guess who the first people are to knock on my door and ask for 100% compensation and then some? It's those folks. So, you know, David, I think that's why, among other reasons, why health care in the South has lagged behind in some other places is because there's really no incentive here there's no big stick through the civil justice system to hold people accountable. Because, like Nick said, they just budget for it, pay it right out as another line of expense.
I'm just curious, do you know what states are more friendly toward tort law? Just off the top of your head. Some in the Northeast?
Well,
what
in the
states?
Northeast, Delaware, Vermont, New York.
Don't quite have the caps.
They're not draconian. New Mexico, places like that, where they don't have caps.
Yeah.
And Georgia, by the way, knocked off their caps. They eliminated caps in medical malpractice cases, and it didn't affect malpractice one way or the other. All it did was allow people who are seriously injured to get fully compensated.
I think you would make the argument in some cases caps aren't necessarily needed, especially as he referred to, the juries these days aren't inclined. You hear every once in a while in the news about some outlandish or just huge jury award, and yes, they'll happen on occasion, but more often than not, the ones you don't hear about, and that's the commonplace ones, it's not a lot of money. The jurors are not giving a ton of money.
To David's point, when was the last time any of you all out there heard about a medical malpractice verdict for the patient? Or for that matter, heard about any type of multi-million-dollar verdict?
The only one that I can go back to is the famous one, the hot coffee spilling, where all this money was awarded because that hurt you and in tort law more than anything else. And it may have been a legitimate case, but some person, and a lot of people view it, some meathead gets hot coffee, spills it on himself, and sues because the coffee's too hot and won. Now, the average Joe hears that, maybe without hearing the other details, and they're like, something's wrong with this system. That dude spilled it on himself. To heck with him. You know, and that hurt tort law when that case came about.
It crushed us because people thought that's what every lawsuit was, when every lawsuit is practically different from that. And by the way, Nick, that case is 27 years old.
And that's the one I can come up with.
27 years. It just fed into people's, what David said.
It stuck with me.
I don't want somebody to have $1 million because I don't have $1 million. When in fact the $1 million is going to compensate someone who's been harmed and lost $1 million worth of anatomy and earning potential and medical expenses. I mean, it's really sad that people feel that way as opposed to just simply following the evidence and doing what they're doing. But you're right. Why do you need caps, particularly in Tennessee when jurors are so conservative?
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting topic. Let's go to Ed. Ed, good morning. Hi, Ed.
Good morning, Nick. You got a good program as usual, and let me tell you what, I am so glad that the the TV company that I'm with now has got you folks.
Awesome. I'm glad it's on. It's good to hear from you, Ed. It's good to hear from you.
I appreciate it. And like I say, you don't hear from me much, but because I sit back, like you say, and a lot of times and just get educated.
Sure.
And so this morning is the same thing. I'm getting educated. I have a question for you. Today I'm going down and get my shingles number 2 shot, and I'm going to get my flu shot. Now, what happens? What recourse would a person have if all of a sudden, in about a month later, I come down with shingles, or I come down with the flu? You know, because used to, when they would shoot that stuff into you, it was a live virus. And you would, you know, people would come down with it. I'm not going to get into it because there may be people like me eating breakfast, and I'm not going to explain to you what happens on that thing. But anyway, well, you would get sick, and it would be deadly. Not deadly, but you would some of the times some of the folks would wind up in the hospital. So. Anyway, is there any recourse on that, or because sometimes the medicine that they prescribe, hey, it's not, it doesn't work.
All right.
Yeah. Now, to Ed's point, there is no guarantee that the manufacturers of the vaccine for shingles, they don't guarantee it will prevent shingles. They will tell you that it will reduce the risk of getting it, or if there's a shingles outbreak, that outbreak will be lesser than it otherwise would. In other words, keeping a forest fire from occurring as opposed to a campfire. So that's the statement that they make. They don't guarantee it. And the same with the flu vaccine.
Yeah.
That's the exact same thing. Now, the interesting thing is, look at it from the other perspective. What happens if you get a vaccine and then a major complication occurs? And we've talked about that before. There's a vaccine compensation fund through the federal government that you can apply to if you get a major complication. But in most instances with vaccines, you can't sue in court if you have a negative reaction. But I'm glad you got that second shingles vaccination, because I think that's going to spare a lot of us. I just had mine last year.
Okay, yeah. Well, shingles, I've never had.
I've talked to people who have it. They've heard it. They say it's worse than chicken pox.
Yeah, and you can get it anywhere. I've seen people with on their face, and it's just
or on
awful.
your eye.
Or on your eye.
And blind you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
All right, listen, we'll take a break on that note. Good questions. Good to hear from you, Ed. Our final segment with Clint Kelly. Phone line's still open. Jump in if you have questions or comments. Some good ones this morning. We'll be back with more right after this.
Have you?